So as I understand it, you've got a whole squad there at LinkedIn, you and a bunch of other smarty pants. And if a company, presumably B2B in most cases, wants to get better at content marketing, then if they spend some money or some sort of magic formula, then they get access to you. Is that how that works?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So our team is sort of a subject matter expert team that is a service we provide to our most strategic advertising customers. It doesn't cost them any money, but it's something that we do just as like a customer success vehicle to try to set them up for success, make sure they're taking advantage of all the things that they can take advantage of, and getting some input from people who've been in the trenches. So we're not part of we work in the sales organization, but we don't carry quotas. We don't have anything like that to worry about. Our job is really just to help impart our knowledge to them and hopefully make them more successful on our platform.
Amber, one of the things that I find works best on LinkedIn in our own work as consultants at Convince and Convert is LinkedIn from an episodic perspective, putting together a LinkedIn show, and I'm throwing up my air quotes here for the podcast listeners, of some sort, whether it's Alan Gannett's regular videos that he shoots 2-minute kind of business tips or longer form LinkedIn live broadcasts that people are executing, but saying, hey, we're gonna have an editorial calendar for LinkedIn, which combines sort of content and social, and we're gonna do a thing every Tuesday, which is this, or every Friday is going to be an excerpt of the Social Pros podcast, which you could absolutely find on LinkedIn. Do you find that working well also from your perspective, or do you have a lot of clients still kind of trying to do the mother of all ebooks, which is going to happen sort of one time?
We see a fair bit of both. And what I will tell you is I do think, in my professional opinion, that the episodic content is more successful. Mostly because I think there is a certain amount of fatigue around the big, heavy hitting assets, and making those more accessible through more derivative content. And what I'm always telling people is consistency is really the secret to LinkedIn. Showing up on the regular, predictable basis in a whatever that cadence happens to be for your audience might be a little bit different, but showing up weekly or every a couple times a week in smaller pieces feels like the way to get traction on this platform. And it's a really big shift for a lot of these companies who are used to the guidance we've put out for many years, which is have a big asset, which isn't wrong, like have a big content asset and then like break it up into a bunch of stuff. I think that still works. But I think people are used to now, they build the big ebook and then they just keep pushing the huge asset and wondering why over time the conversions don't happen. And there's a certain amount of fatigue for that stuff. So if you're going to build the giant rock, you have to be willing to do the work to do the episodic, or I call it interstitial content in between, so that people get little tastes of things along the way, not necessarily just big gulps.
I'm curious if there is a narrative arc, to use your term, that seems to work better on LinkedIn. When I think about LinkedIn and I think about traditional LinkedIn, I think of content and narrative and story arcs that are around career. They're very professional oriented. And my question for you is that still kind of the narrative arc and the type of content that resonates well, or is it interesting and impactful to kind of do the 180 and be differentiated on your platform, as we've seen LinkedIn evolve so much, especially after the Microsoft acquisition?
Yeah, well, I think you answered your own question in there, because it's the latter. I think, yes, our legacy has to do with careers, and there's always going to be a subset of people on LinkedIn that come to further their career in one way or shape or form. But in a digital world, what that looks like, shaping your career, empowering yourself as a professional, educating yourself, looks very different now than it did a while ago. And humans are not that neatly drawn in a box. So you don't come to LinkedIn and put your professional hat on and then forget all the other ways you're a human. And a big mistake I think a lot of companies make is they try to be like, well, it's LinkedIn, it's got to be very white collar, professional. And the reality is it's not that way. Our audience is evolving and looking for a broader array of stuff that's inspirational, educational, personal, professional. As a matter of fact, personally, I do a fair bit of content about marketing on LinkedIn, and I do a lot of content around my project around imposter syndrome that I've been working on. That content gets so much more play than the stuff about marketing. And you would think that people would come to me like, oh, she's a marketing person, I want her to talk about marketing. But the squishier stuff, the more personal stuff, and things that maybe don't walk the traditional beaten path of careers and professional stuff are finding a home on LinkedIn way more than I think anybody expected.
If you've got great content, we've been talking about that content still needs to get seen. And as LinkedIn gets more and more popular as a platform, as Adam mentioned, lots of conversations amongst his clients and mine as well about LinkedIn headed into 2020. Of course, that creates more content, same number of eyeballs or a growing number of eyeballs. You end up with an algorithm problem the same way that Facebook experiences, the same way that Instagram experiences, and to a somewhat lesser extent, the same way that Twitter experiences. The algorithm is everything. What tips do you have for Social Pros listeners, Amber, for playing the algorithm game on LinkedIn, and how might they think about that differently from the algorithm games they're playing elsewhere?
So the interesting thing about the algorithm, lots of people like to speculate about like what the algorithm does and doesn't, and penalizes and punishes and all that kind of stuff. Our engineering team will actually tell you verbatim exactly how the algorithm works. So if you go to, I think it's engineering.linkedin.com, maybe I can give you the real URL, but they have a blog, and
we'll link it up in the show notes, guys. We'll go to socialpros.com, look for this episode. We'll make sure that the link is there.
Yeah, perfect. I'll say, so there's, on June 25th, I think it was, the engineering team wrote a blog about the changes that they had made to the algorithm most recently. And there's 3 things that they prioritize when it all comes down to it. One is content that they consider is creating engagement. And some of that can be passive engagement. So that can be a like, a click, a share, or a comment. But they also look at dialogue, and dialogue and conversation are sort of different in that they're looking for strings of content in the comments. So people talking back and forth, comments that are substantive, not just nice post, but questions, comments, conversation. And then they're looking at relevance. So who is interacting with that content? Is it people right within your first degree connections? Or if you're a brand, the people who are following your company page? Is that spilling over a couple of degrees? Are more people coming in? So they're looking at those aspects. So all the little tips and tricks of like, oh, LinkedIn punishes external links, or gee, you should put the link in the comments. All of that's really a myth. Most of it is the content engaging? That's what's going to get surfaced first, because our chief purpose is to create value in the feed, whether that takes a nanosecond or 10 minutes. So unlike some platforms, time on site is not as important to us. It's, do you find what you want in that moment so that you will come back again because you've found that content to be really valuable. So the best thing you can do is create relevant, interesting, engaging content that gets your community talking. That's the stuff that the algorithm is going to favor.
Jay, Amber just gave us the keys to the kingdom there. Engagement, dialogue, relevance. Those are the 3 keys to success on LinkedIn platform. That is great.